Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Last week I made a video talking about the rosters for the OWCS Asia region, for Japan, and for the Pacific subregions. But today I am going to be talking about the Korean region, obviously the region that most people are looking at as the one that's going to produce the favorite team to get out of the whole tournament, potentially, and win it all. Everyone's looking here in Korea. So we got 9 teams in Korea. We have WAC, Genesis, Team Falcons, From the Gamer, Yeti, Runaway, Pokerface, Sin Priest of Gaming, and Vesta Crew. So these are our 9 teams. And we're going to go in, take a look at the rosters, and be a little more in-depth in this video than I was in the video on Japan and Pacific, but if you want to see that video and hear some of my thoughts on those rosters, I'll link to it in the description. It'll be at the end of this video as well as in the cards, so you can check it out there. But let's take a look at the rosters here for the 9 Korean teams. This, of course, is Liquipedia if you want to go and check it out. Things are still a little in flux. The rosters are locked in at this point in time, generally speaking. There are some changes that have been made, but very few as we go into the matches, which will be kicking off here in a few days. So let's start with WAC, WAC, the first team there. Top left, their roster consists of Lip, Heesang, Junbin, Max, Chorong, and Shu. This is one of the teams that a lot of people are highlighting as one of the potential favorites to get out. There are going to be 3 teams from Korea that qualify automatically to the Asia LAN that happens where teams from Japan and Pacific and Korea all meet, plus a 4th team goes to the wild card, and most likely a Korean team will be the team that wins there. So most likely 4 of these teams will be competing in the Asia LAN, and then 2 of those teams eventually will move on to the DreamHack event in Dallas. But we'll talk about that as we get closer to that. For now, let's just highlight the teams that we have here for the first half of the OWCS season here. And like I said, we're starting with WAC with their roster. So WAC has some very good players. I think they're a very interesting team. If you've been watching the Overwatch League, if you followed the Overwatch League, most of the names on this in this video should be familiar to you. Lip, arguably one of the greatest players of all time, DPS player, known especially for his Sombra play, but also a very strong hit scan player, plays stuff like Cassidy and Nash at a high level. Pair him with Heesang, who is a traditional flex DPS player, so he also is going to bring out your stuff like your Tracers, your Genjis, your Echo. So very good. They kind of help cover each other's strengths and weaknesses quite well. They're a good duo. Heesang, a player that had a pretty good season in the second half of the year last year. Started on the San Francisco Shock, where he actually played with Junbin and Max, who were his teammates back in Contenders on O2 Blast. They go to the Shock together. The team kind of doesn't work very well. Heesang goes over to the Vancouver Titans, where he has a much better second half of the year playing alongside Sugarfree and that team over there. And then you have the support line of Chorong and Shu. Chorong, of course, comes off a win in the Overwatch League 2023 season with the Florida Mayhem Shu runner-up with Houston Outlaws, as well as some other kind of tournament wins throughout his career. This is a very good roster. I think this is a really solid roster. I think my biggest concern is the tanks of Junbin and Max. They were not very good situationally last year in a lot of cases. I actually think that the coaching staff for the Shock last year just did not do any favors to these two. I think they kept trying to make them both work in ways that didn't really work. They would put Junbin in to play the heroes he's good at, but then also take him out for a map and put Max in to play the same heroes instead of putting Max in on stuff like the Sigma or the Zarya, which is kind of where his specialties lie. So to me, it was just an odd team. They just did weird things that I just didn't really like or understand why they did it that way. And so I think when you look at what this team has now, and I think when you look at their overall roster now and the way that their team is now, I think it's a much better position. I think Chorong and Shu is a much better backline than what Max and Junbin had with the Shock. Plus Lip and Heesang. I think Lip just covers Heesang's basis a little better than Proper did. So it's a very good team. I think there's a lot of talent on it. I think they're one of the favorites to get out of this group. They really are such a phenomenal team, and there's a lot to kind of look at with them and highlight and prioritize. So they're, to me, one of the teams that is in kind of that, like, top tier. I mean, there's kind of like 3 tiers here. There's, like, probably one of the potential favorites, teams that, depending on the meta, are going to be good, and teams that I just don't really think are in much of the hunt. I put WAC in that kind of top tier. But let's go to the next team. Actually, real quick, before I move on from WAC, I want to mention their coaching staff, which is Moon and Pavan. Moon, of course, head coach for the Shanghai Dragons for many years, won the grand finals in 2021. Pavan was the coach for New York Excelsior back in 2018 and has been kind of bouncing around as an assistant coach for a couple of years. And I think they're a good coaching staff. You know that they've done a lot. They've found success, so feel pretty good about them. Now moving on to Genesis, formerly Unemployer was the name of their team. They have a DPS duo of Decay and Choi Se-won, tanks Kellen and Kalios, and supports Teru and Maka. So you have the Kellen Kalios tank line, of course, the second half of the 2021 season with New York, as well as I believe they were on a team together. I'm drawing a blank on what team it was, but they played together in Contenders as well for Talon, I believe, was the team they were on. This is a team that I find very interesting. I think Decay Choi Se-won is a very solid DPS duo. Those are 2 players that have looked very good in their career. I think they have overlap, which is good. They can both play Tracer, which is nice. Decay is going to be the harder hit scan player on this team, which I think is his better role, despite the fact that he has seemingly not wanted to play it in the past. I think maybe now he's in a position where he feels a little bit better about it. Choi Se-won, phenomenal flex DPS player. The Tracer, the Genji, the Echo. I mean, he's unbelievable. Kind of got underrated or underrepresented or just very underwhelming team situation for him throughout his career with the Guangzhou Charge, but this team I think is better built around him. Kellen and Kalios, interesting tank duo. I think they are both players that are solid. I don't think either of them are amazing. I think they're just pretty good. They're pretty run-of-the-mill. I think this is a team that really is going to live or die by Decay and Choi Se-won. They're really, to me, the thing that are the lifeblood of this team, the driving force behind this team. Because I also don't think Teru Maka are phenomenal. They're both flex support players. Double flex is not huge right now. Maka, we have not seen a lot of him at the Overwatch League level because we haven't seen him at all. He was on the Florida Mayhem last year for a little bit, but they didn't win with Maka in. He never actually played, so we didn't really get to see him much. Teru has been an interesting player, began as a DPS player, moved over to flex support, has been okay to pretty good at times, but to me this is a team that doesn't have the same kind of levels of consistency that you have with a team like WAC or with Team Falcons we'll talk about next. I just think that you look at their support line, there's a lot of questions about it. If it's a heavy Lucio meta, which it seems like it will be, I don't think they have what you want to succeed there. So I think they're going to rely quite heavily on their DPS. And their tanks are fine. I don't think either of them play any one hero so well that they can kind of rely very heavily. And if it's a ball meta, how do you feel about Kellen? Not amazing. If it's Winston, he should be okay. If it's Ryan, maybe. But there's not a ton of incredible kind of flexibility there. So this is a kind of roster that if this was a roster in the Overwatch League, you would have been like, this is an okay roster. And so now with a 9-team situation, like it just is not as solid as what I would like to see from a team, especially with Decay and Choi Se-won. But I do think one of the things that they do well is they have such an elite level DPS, and I think you really get enough out of Kellen and Kalios' players who have just been, you know, they're neither one of them I think is going to light up the world, but I think they're both good enough and consistent enough on their best picks that you can manage to get some wins against some pretty good teams. I think they're probably in that middle tier. I don't think they're bad. I think in the right metas they would be really, really good. Like if they get like a Tracer Genji meta with Diva or with Winston, they could be very, very good. And like a double flex meta. But I think that they don't have the full flexibility that I want from a team with this DPS duo. Their coaching staff, they have Ho Chi Lee as their coach. He's been around. I believe he was an assistant coach for the Defiant at one point, as well as just kind of bouncing around in Contenders for the past couple of years. So this is, like I said, this is a team that I'm interested in seeing play because I want to see how the Teru Maka support line works. I think a lot of The high that this team can hit really depends on whether or not Teru Maka can be a very solid support line that are consistent enough to kind of hit where they need to, because otherwise I really don't think this team is going to be able to reach the highs that you want them to. So we'll see what happens, though. Next, we got Team Falcons. This is the team that looks to be the best team in this region. They have a DPS duo of Proper and Stalker. They have tanks Smurf and Hanbin. They have supports Chio, Fielder, and Sir Majed. Shout out to Sir Majed, the only non-Korean player competing in the Korean region. Falcons, of course, is a Saudi Arabian organization, and they're just deciding to compete in Korea this year, but that's why Sir Majed is on the team. They want to have a Saudi Arabian player there representing the team, at least. This team is a bunch of Overwatch League veterans and champions. Smurf and Hanbin, they've won in the past. Smurf won with the Shock. Hanbin, Chio, Fielder won with the Dallas Fuel. Proper and Stalker, neither of them have won a major championship. Proper, of course, won in Contenders a lot. Made the Grand Finals in 2022. Stalker was on the Atlanta Reign last year that won the Midseason Madness. So this is a team that is just a bunch of the best players potentially in the world. They should be the best team in this region. They should be the team that finishes as the top spot. They just are that good on paper. I think if there's one potential criticism you can give, it's very similar to the criticism that I gave to the Shock last year, which is that I don't think Proper being your dedicated hit scan is the way to go with him as a player. He can play it if you need it, but if he's the one playing your hit scan, you're kind of losing what makes Proper so good. I think Stalker is a bit more flexible than he's saying, and I think that helps Proper become a little bit better and enables him a little more to be a solid player, but that's really the only criticism I have. Smurf and Hanbin, they're two all-time greats in the tank role. They both can play like everything. Smurf can play every main tank. Hanbin can play every off tank. Chio is the best Lucio in the world right now. Fielder's a phenomenal flex support. So to me, this team just checks every box that you want for a successful team. I think there's really no real major weakness here. Yes, maybe a really strong hit scan meta. They won't look as good as they could, but they're not bad. You pair that with a coaching staff of Junkbuck and Krusty. I mean, this team to me is the favorites. They are a juggernaut team. They were Team Hamster, if you recall, competing in the Flash Ops tournament at the end of last year, and they just rolled everybody. They dominated everybody. The only difference is that they had a Fearless instead of Smurf. Now they have Smurf. So to me, this team is just above and beyond, well above where everybody else is. I'm going to just throw out there that not only do I think they should be the favorites to win this Korean tournament, they also are probably the favorites to win the DreamHack Dallas event already. We haven't even seen them play an OWCS game, and they already seem to be the best team that there is. That's just what we're dealing with here with them. Let's do From the Gamer next. This team consisting of Flora, ATVI, Bellisria, Bernard, Violet, and Finn. I think this team, to me, little similar to Genesis in terms of their level of play. I think their DPS duo, slightly lower than Decay and Choisewan, though I still think they're very good. I rate Flora very highly, probably higher than most. I think he's a very good DPS player. And I think last year we saw how good he can be when he doesn't have to be the number one guy, when you have someone like ATVI who can do a lot. Very, very good flex DPS player. I think those two pair with each other very well. Bellisria, Bernard, the old Fusion boys from back in the day. Bellisria a little more recent than Bernard, but Bernard obviously came back into the league late last year, joined the Houston Outlaws for the playoffs, and led them largely, being the thing that led them to that second place finish. Bellisria played with the Seoul Dynasty last year. Very good Wrecking Ball player, which if we're in a Wrecking Ball meta, we'll see a lot of Bellisria. I think both these players are very good. I love Bernard. I think Bernard's one of the players that has been underrated for pretty much his entire Overwatch League career. The fact that it took him all of last season to find a team and to get signed, to me, is just absurd. To me, that's just the teams doing a poor job as general managers to leave him on the bench, because, I mean, he is just such a phenomenal, or not on the bench, on the streets, because he's a very good player who absolutely, I think, contributes to this team quite a lot. And then you have the Violet Finn backline. Violet, of course, arguably the greatest player in the history of the Overwatch League, two-time Overwatch League champion, a runner-up last year, tons of tournament wins under his belt, just a phenomenal player who's done incredible things throughout his career. Finn did play with Violet on the Shock for a year in 2022, but last year did not have an incredible year. Bit of an underwhelming, I think, career for him so far. I think it's interesting he's on this roster. I think it'll be interesting to see what this duo can do. Violet, arguably the best main support, flex support player in the league. Began his career as a flex support player. Really good Zenyatta play. Really kind of the hero he made his name on. And BAP as well. And has transitioned to becoming a very good Lucio player over the years. And so this is a backline that has played together. They know how each other work. They kind of know each other's play styles, which I think helps. So I think this team is a bit more consistent than Genesis is. That's kind of the comparison I would draw based on what we've talked about so far. Lots of really good players who've been around the scene for a while. Tank line is good. I think better than the Kellen Kalios one. Support line is better than the Terimaka one. DPS slightly lower, but I think they are overall a bit of a more consistent team. Their coaching staff is Neko and Yaki. Yaki, of course, a player well known for his Tracer play, his Genji play, his Echo play for teams like Florida Mayhem, New York Excelsior, LA Gladiators. Neko, another former player, now their head coach. He's been coaching. I believe he was the head coach last year for the Houston Outlaws, so he's done well. I think this team really is, in my opinion, this team is slept on, and I think they're underrated. I've heard people talk about how they think some teams are better. I think this team is getting underrated. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're not as good as I think they are, but I would put this team above Genesis personally, because as much as I think Decay, Choice and One are really good, I think this team just has way more consistency in the tank and support line. That even Flora Alfie are phenomenal players in their own right, who will be able to contribute quite well. So I like this team a lot. I think they are one of my personal picks to be in that top 4. They might be the team that has to win through the LCQ. That might be how they get in there, but I think they're better than people are giving them credit for. I think they're a very, very good team, and I am excited to see them play. This might be the team I'm most interested in seeing play outside of maybe WAC. I'm very excited about this one. Moving on, we have Yeti. Their roster consists of Knife, Viper, Donghawk, Bliss, and Irony. Very young team here. Most of these players, I think Irony is the exception, were rookies in 2023. Irony, I believe, played in the past as well. Donghawk was last year's Rookie of the Year. Knife didn't have a lot of playtime in the league. It was a mid-season addition for the Vegas Eternal, but was very good on that team. Viper was on a pretty poor Shanghai Dragons team, but looked very good as well. His Tracer was unbelievable. And then Bliss and Irony. Bliss played for the Dallas Fuel. Was pretty good main support player. And Irony, I believe, also ended up on the Vegas Eternal last year, as well as having a stint on the Hangzhou Spark in the past. This, to me, is a team that I would put in that second, maybe third tier. They have a coaching staff of Fate and Fleta. So 2 players turned coaches. Neither of them have been very successful as coaches. We haven't really seen their coaching acumen yet, so we'll kind of see what happens with them. But this is a team that I think if it's a ball meta, they'll be good, because Donghawk do be balling quite a lot and is a very good wrecking ball. And Knife and Viper are players that when we saw them play in the Overwatch League, they were good. We really don't have a lot to go off of from them, especially because they were on terrible teams. They were arguably the 2 worst teams in the league last year. Bliss had a good run with Dallas late in the season. He was surrounded by some incredible talent. Obviously, Hanbin on that roster is a phenomenal player. Sparkle, very good player. They were good. They weren't amazing. So this is one of those teams that to me is very hit or miss. I think they could be very good when you have players or you have coaches who were former players who are some of the all-time greats who have won championships. You have an MVP winner with Fleta. You have just a very consistent team that kind of knows what they're doing, that knows how to perform at high levels. I think that makes this team look kind of like a team that could potentially do quite a lot. But I don't feel as good about this team as I do, say, from the Gamer or Genesis, who I just think have a little bit more going for them. I think the support line of Bliss Irony, I would take it over Teru and Maka, for example. But Donghawk as a solo tank concerns me if you move into a flex tank meta. We haven't really seen one of those in a while, but if you do, I would be a little concerned about that. Knife and Viper, I take Decay and Choice I over them, so that's kind of where I sit on them. I think they're probably in that second level. I think they have the potential to be very, very good. I need to see more development and improvement from these young players before I'm ready to put them in a tier with some of these teams up here. But I think they're good, and I think they have the potential to make a dent in stuff, especially if we are in a Wrecking Ball meta. If Wrecking Ball is as good as he has been, players like Bellisria and Junbin and Donghak are dangerous. Even Mag, dangerous players who are very good on that hero. And that would be the key to me for this team to do well. But right now, I don't rate them super highly in terms of their overall position. I just think they are a little lackluster and a little too young and unproven for me to right now crown them as a really, really top-level team. Next, we have Runaway. This roster has a DPS duo of Prophet and Zest, Mag as their tank, and Lee Jae-gon and Vigilante as their supports. Obviously, this is the Prophet who spent time last year, at the beginning of the year with the Soul Dynasty hitscan player, before being released from the team, and Zest, the flex DPS player on this team. Very good player for the Soul Infernal / Philadelphia Fusion for the past couple of years. Phenomenal player there. Mag was on that team as well, alongside Zest. And then you have Lee Jae-gon, Overwatch League champion in 2021, and a very big part of last year's Boston Uprising roster. And Vigilante spent the last season with the Atlanta Reign. Past couple seasons, actually, with the Atlanta Reign. So this is a team that I think is in kind of a similar position to, I'll say, Genesis. I think they're a little bit better than Yeti, though it's pretty close. Really, to me, the thing that sells this roster is Lee Jae-gon and Vigilante's backline. They're both phenomenal players who I think really have the talent and the ability to elevate this team quite a lot. Lee Jae-gon, obviously, very, very aggressive player, but I think this whole team is kind of a very aggressive team. Vigilante, a pretty aggressive player. Mag, a pretty aggressive player. So I think this is a team that is going to excel on very fast-paced, very go-in-your-face type of play, which can be streaky, can be hit or miss. If you play a team like Falcons that's very, very, very good and has a really deep understanding of the game, you can struggle a little bit more, I think, against a team like that. But I like this team quite a bit. I think Prophet being their hitscan player, bit of a sour point. I think that's where I would like to see them potentially invest in getting another player. I also don't love Mag as the solo tank. The Infernal last year were good for much of the year, but by the time the playoffs rolled around, they were not a very good team, and a lot of that I think it was just they did not have the flexibility to cover the meta as it changed. People thought it was going to be a Zarya meta, it became a Sigma meta, and Mag couldn't play either of those at a high level. So that's really my concern with Runaway, is I just think that they are a little bit too one-note. I don't think they have the levels of dimension you need. So I put them in that second tier where I think they have a talent. I think they have some very good players. I think in the right environment, in the right situations, they could be one of the top teams. I don't think they have what it takes to take down a team like Falcons or WAC. But yeah, they could beat Genesis and From the Gamer for sure. They could beat Yeti for sure. I don't think they looked like a team that's going to have a really big run based on what I'm seeing from them on paper. Paper's obviously not everything, but I think a lot of these players have been... Mag had his best year last year. That was the best year of his career, and if that continues, then I think we'll be pretty happy with where this team ends up. But I don't think Lee Jae-gon was particularly great last year. He was fine. Vigilante didn't get as much playtime as Fielder, so it's a little hard to judge him there. So it's tough. This is one of those ones where I don't know exactly how to feel about it. They do have a staff of Runner and Chara. Runner, of course, the guy who runs Runaway. It's his team. Chara was the coach for... I believe he was the head coach last year for the Soul Infernal. He was one of the coaches, so it makes sense that you have Mag and Zest on there. So it'll be interesting to see this team. I think they're one of the ones that I'm curious to see kind of how they do, because I don't really know what to make of their overall level of play for a team that I just has not really shown me enough consistency and flexibility to think that they're going to be elite. Obviously, Prophet, there's a lot of questions about him. He's been kind of criticized as being a widow one-trick in the past. He's a very good player. When he plays well, he looks good, but I just think this team lacks some of the second and third gear that they need to be an elite level team. Next team is Poker Face. Oh boy, oh boy. This team is kind of a disaster, if I'm going to be honest with you. They're good, but I think there's a lot of things about them that I just don't love. It should be noted about this Poker Face roster, they did make some roster changes. They had two pretty good DPS players on their team before, Probe and Spectra, who have both left the team, and they added Becky and Jasmine. I think that hurts this team quite a bit. Jasmine is such a weird signing, and I'll talk about that in a second. But Spectra, to me, is such a phenomenal DPS player. In half a year, had a very good case to potentially be Rookie of the Year last year. Probe, I thought was a very good signing for the Shock last year, contributed quite a lot as a hit scan player. Those are losses that will be felt. Becky being basically the replacement for Spectra, fine. Becky spent some time in the past on the Valiant. I believe he ended up somewhere else, I want to say, last year. Maybe it was just he was on... yes, he was on the team Panthera that played in Contenders. That's right. Now I recall. He's fine. Flex DPS player. Going to play much of the same stuff Spectra played, just not as well. Proud. Okay. DPS player. Finale, same thing. I don't really think any of these players are particularly great. I just don't think that they have a team that I look at and go, this is a great DPS line. They're okay. Like I said, they're fine. Proud, been on Poker Face for a long time. Been playing Contenders for a long time. This is his first kind of big stage performance. His first time on one of those really good teams. Finale has been around. Spent time on the Vegas Eternal last year at the end of the year. Was on Toronto Defiant and Boston Uprising Academy for a while. So it's okay. Totally fine. They're all decent players. I don't think any of them are as impressive. I think this is probably the weakest DPS line we've talked about so far. Then you get to Peppy and Jasmine, who play the same stuff. They're both off-tank players that just basically play D.Va and Sigma and Zarya, so I don't really understand why that's the route they went with. Maybe Jasmine or Peppy has been... presumably Jasmine, if they signed Jasmine, has been grinding stuff like Winston and Ball and is much better on those heroes than Peppy, but it's just an odd addition to have two players that kind of play the same thing. Neither of them have been at the Overwatch League level, so hard to say much about them other than just that's what they are. And then their support trio, Faith, Simple, Iris, very good. Solid players. None of them, I think, are amazing, but they're pretty good. I think it's probably the best part of this roster, honestly, is their support line. So I think this team's average. I think losing Spectra and Probe hurts this team a lot. I think they probably are both going to North America, so I just don't have a lot of confidence in this team. I put them probably that second tier, maybe that third tier. I just don't think they have much going for them, and I think they're not going to really impress much when the matches kick off. The last two teams we have here, SPG, Simprisa Gaming. Their team is Aid Argon for the DPS, Milgaru and Tuyu for the tanks, Hyunjae and Lee Sumin for the supports. Some Overwatch League veterans, Tuyu, Hyunjae, Lee Sumin. None of them were particularly amazing in the Overwatch League. Then you have Aid, Argon, Milgaru. They all played on this SPG roster that did have minimal success in Contenders and the Overwatch League Opens last year in the Eastern region. Ultimately, this is, I think, one of the weaker teams. I think the last two, to me, even the bottom three in general, I don't really think any of these teams have much of a chance at anything. I think SPG and Investor Crew are particularly the weakest of the teams here. I just don't... One, these are players who, like I said, SPG only limited Overwatch League play time with Tuyu, Hyunjae, and Lee Sumin, and none of them were particularly great. Hyunjae was on the Soul Infernal when they were bad in the playoffs. I don't put that fully on him, but just a thing that happened. I don't think he made the team worse, and they were bad before Hyunjae joined. And Hyunjae only joined because of injury. This is one of those things where I think what you always are going to find with teams like this, Aid's pretty good DPS player. I think that's always the way it works with these kind of contenders teams. The best talent that is kind of younger is always DPS. DPS talent always seems to kind of look pretty good because that's, I think, the role that you can have the highest impact on. So I think they're an okay team at DPS. They're brothers, Aid and Milgaru, fun fact. So this is a team I don't feel particularly great about. I didn't mention Runaways, or not Runaway, Parker-Ways' coaching staff today. There you go. There's the coaching staff for these last two that I didn't talk about. Blue Hoss for Pokerface does have a little bit of Overwatch League history, but SPG, not really any. Mobugi, I believe, has a little bit, but I don't feel great about this team, and I feel even less great about the final team, Vesta Crew. They have Minute and Dart as their DPS, Groom as their tank, and then Off and Daegun as their supports. There's their coaching staff. This team is the only team here that has 0 Overwatch League veterans. Not a single player in this team has ever played in the Overwatch League. So this is very much they were the last team to qualify. They were the 3rd LCQ team. So this is very much a team of, they are going to be the prove it team. What I will say is always interesting is a team like Vesta Crew or SPG or Pokerface, these kind of lower teams that probably won't qualify, keep your eyes on their talent. If there is a player on this team that looks really, really good, they're going to get poached by a team like WAC or Genesis or From the Gamer that has a good team, but they're missing a piece. They don't realize they're missing a piece. So like even Falcons, for example, maybe they struggle in a hit scan meta and they want to get someone like Aid, right? Or a team that doesn't really have a great tank situation. Like Pokerface doesn't have a great tank situation. I don't think they're going to be very good, so I don't think that's something they're going to really fix. But it's possible that a team wants to try to find another main tank. And so maybe a player like Milgaru, who has been decent, who plays Ball and Winston, maybe he ends up on a team, Sorry about that. You never really know, right? So there's always stuff like that to look out for. But those bottom 3 I don't really feel that great about. I think they're all kind of I don't think any of them are particularly great teams. And so I think really you're looking at these I think these top 4, honestly, WAC, Genesis, Team Falcons, From the Gamer, these are my top 4. I think they look to me better than Yeti and Runaway. I think Yeti Runaway could be good enough to get it, but I think it's these 4. I think Falcons number 1, WAC number 2. I'll say From the Gamer, Genesis as 3 and 4. But yeah, those are your Korean teams for OWCS. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on any of these rosters. Which ones you think look good, not as good, players you get your eyes on, whatever it is. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that's all for today. Thank you all so much once again. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. And this was a bit of a long one, but if you did watch it and want more like it in the future, like I said, your support greatly appreciated. But that's all for today. Thank you once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.